Hi, this is Bo Hudson, and I have another great guest for us. Of course, you know what we talk about on this show is voiceover, but sometimes I like to bring on other people who have sort of a side or a peripheral idea for our voiceover careers. So I would like to bring to the show today Kim Chestney. And hi, Kim.
Hi. Hi, Bo.
I'm going to give you a quick little bio. Kim is the author of Radical Intuition, founder of the Intuition Lab, and we're going to find out all about that. So, first of all, Kim, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get involved in the idea of intuition, and what do you bring to it as far as credentials?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Bo. So I guess my passion for intuition started as a young person, having had experiences in that department that I needed to understand and work through, and it sort of became a passion in my life. And life sort of led me that way. I got a book deal, and then my career in technology. I worked in creative technology, so I did a lot of work with the arts and innovation. And during that process, I kept hearing the word intuition over and over again. People started talking about it all the time, and I realized that intuition was something more than just a spiritual experience. It was something that really informs all of our life, and it's really crucial, I think, to our success as human beings on pretty much all levels, whether it's our relationships or our businesses or our creativity. If you do something in line with your intuition, you're going to do it the best.
Okay, give us some examples of in those early on years before you wrote your book. What did you feel was intuition, and how do you describe that?
So the biggest question I get in regards to, well, my book Radical Intuition is my most recent book, and the biggest question is always, what is intuition and how do we know the difference? And as a young person, I was really just sort of finding my way through it, because there's not a lot of official research on this. Back in those days, there's authors who would write about it, and there were places in Eastern mysticism and even Christian mysticism that talk about it. But it was something that really, we've been so conditioned in our world right now to think of our thinking mind as really the only source that we have for guiding our life. But we really have this complementary faculty of intuition that is linked to our imagination and our heart and creativity and all of that stuff, that's there to guide us. So whether it's a gut feeling or a sudden knowing or a moment of inspiration or insight or genius, there's so many different ways that intuition can inform our life. So that's sort of what I focus on in Radical Intuition, is trying to understand what are the main ways that we're experiencing intuition, because everyone experiences it differently. So that's part of the trick with teaching intuition, is touching everybody's own unique talents, because it really is like a talent to get into that intuitive flow.
Where does it come from, our intuition?
Well, I think Yogananda said that best when he said that intuition is the soul's power of knowing God. And I really feel like it is from the highest of high, whatever your beliefs are, whether it's a spiritual connection or even in physics. My new book, The Illumination Code, is about the physics of intuition and how intuition is from our source, and it's part of the code that travels in the non-local field and informs us and guides us from that place of all-knowing. So whatever sort of lens you use to understand the world, your intuition is your connection to the source of that, the all-knowing part of that has all of the information in the world.
So you don't necessarily have to be religious or even spiritual for that matter. You don't have to believe in like a god or saints or Buddha or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, it just is an implicit part of our reality, one that we've sort of, like I said, have been trained to not look at, because that's where the power is. The real power is that's where the genius is. That's where the real information is. So we've sort of let that part of our brain atrophy. And you don't need to be any religion to use it. You don't need to be a man or a woman or have any sort of degrees. It's innate in all human beings.
And how do we bring it into play? How do we make it happen? Do we have to meditate or think or write, or what are some of your tricks?
Great question. the first thing I always tell people is when you want to work with your intuition, the very first thing you need to do is slow down and make more space in your life. Because
Mm.
intuition flows in the silence, in the stillness, in the receptive place of being. So whether it's just putting more white space on your calendar, or going for a walk, or taking that hot shower, hot bath, those places, I call them no mind portals. That's when you're kind of zoning out and you're not thinking about things too much. You're just in this relaxed, open state. And that's where those insights drop in. So think about it. When was the last time you had a great idea? When you were typing at your computer? Like never, right? Because you're always just
You're
writing,
busy.
you're
Your
responding to
mind's
emails,
busy.
and you're solving problems, right? But when you have those moments of genius and those creative insights, they flow in the space between your busy thoughts. So when you have them in the shower, when you're driving to work, when you're in those places where you're kind of zoning out, that's when they pop in. So creating more space for that intuition to flow is really key. And we're so busy right now, right? So that's get off our social media, take a little time away from your phone, just be in stillness and presence, and open up space for that to drop in, because intuition's way easier than regular thinking. You don't have to put all this work into it. All you have to do is open up and receive it. It just comes to you.
Is it good to maybe meditate and think, what should I be doing, or what should I change, that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. If you like to meditate, meditation is a wonderful tool. Yoga, qigong, any kind of like bike riding, walking, any exercise that makes you feel good or uplifts you, because you want to be in a really like calm, clear state of mind. And when you have emotions or you're stressed out, all that stuff creates static, and then the mind gets in the way. So we can't have that pure intuition flowing in when we're in that state of excited mind, or busy mind, or overthinking, or fear, or worry, or all that stuff that comes with it. It comes from that calm place, stillness inside us.
How can we trust it? I mean, wouldn't it be easy to, think we're supposed to do something or make a big change? How do we know for sure that it's our intuition speaking to us and not just our wishes, for instance? I know they're probably connected. I know wishes and intuition are probably connected, but I mean, let's be real. An example would be, let's say somebody has a grinding job. They've got a family and they really don't want to do that job anymore. And it pops into their brain, well, maybe I should go back into art school. Maybe I should do more art. Maybe I should become an artist. But the reality is that they probably have to go to work and get that paycheck that week. So how do you trust your intuition to know that yes, that's the right thing to do?
Such a great question. And so to just really get into a state of trust with our intuition, we have to tune into it and work with it a lot, so we recognize the difference between those situations like you just described. And that is such a common question, because you have a calling, right? And intuition is a calling. It's telling you to go out and do something in the world that's meaningful, and to make the world better, because that's what the intuition wants. It wants us all to contribute our best and live our best life and make the world better. It wants us to expand with the universe. So it's sort of our guide to help us do that. But there is this sort of gray area. We're like, well, is this something that I personally want, or is this something that my intuition is calling me to do? So really listening, again, trying to get all of those personal sort of ego senses out of the way, and listen to that calling. Like there's something called resonance that we work with a lot in Intuition Lab, is that idea of being called forward, moved, pulled. Like your intuition will do that. So even if in this example, somebody, oh, I'm an artist and I want to paint, but I have to go and have a job. Well, just because I have the job doesn't mean I'm still not going to have a calling to go do this thing that my soul craves, right? So
Exactly.
um sometimes we have to make balance things to make things fit and make things work, and maybe it takes time to get where we need to be. But if there's anything on your heart, if there's something that makes your heart sing that you're not doing, it's likely that that is an intuitive calling, because we want to be aligned with that high energy part of ourselves. And sometimes we have to balance that out with the boring stuff like feeding ourselves and paying the rent, but but we don't want to ever ignore those callings, because they're there for a reason. It's our soul speaking to us, and we want to honor that. And because if we don't, sometimes then you have that whisper, shout, roar situation where life's like, come on, you need to go and do this, and you're like, no. And then things
Yeah.
the universe aligns to make those things happen for you.
Okay, so you have on your website something called the Radical Intuition Toolbox. Maybe you
Mhm.
could tell us a little bit about what that is.
Yeah, so on my website, there's a variety of free tools that you can get, that anyone can get, and it really helps you to sort of start to play with your own intuition, work with it, understand what it is, understand how it works. It's there's one that's a free intuition awakening guide too. That's part of that toolbook. It's a 12-page mini book. It just really talks about the 4 types of intuition. And back to your intuition original question, is, how do I understand what intuition is? Well, the 4 types of intuition really talk about the 4 intuitive pathways and the different ways that human beings can receive intuition. And some people are creative, some people are more like in their head, and they do sort of more, they're good with the decision making and the teaching and the counseling and all of that stuff. And then there's people that are more in their heart and their feelers. So it talks about that, so you could kind of identify what your own pathways are and how your intuition naturally flows, so you can kind of become more aware of it. So yeah, and there's some other fun tools in there. If you get the book, you get a whole suite of tools if you get Radical Intuition along with that too.
And what is your website?
It's kimchestney.com is my personal website. That's CHESTNEY. And then intuition-lab.com is our intuition school. If you're interested in practicing, we have live groups that we do intuition exchanges and work with our intuition together.
Great. Um, I'm thinking that did intuition used to be stronger in our culture? Talking about our American United States culture, was it stronger at some point and we sort of forgot how to do it, or what
Yeah.
happened?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think in world history in general, I think we were much more attuned. The ancient peoples were deeply attuned to their intuition. There's so many examples of that. But I think, especially in Western society with technology, it's created a real problem because we've gotten so in our heads. Everything is in our heads with the social media and always being online, and we're so in our heads. That's why it's the mindfulness movement is so important right now as a counterpoint to that, because it's reminding us to step back from that and reconnect, because we've gotten so smart. We've created all these wonderful things and built these knowledge systems and have massive feats of technology, and we can go into outer space, but we've forgotten about that interconnection. And it's so important right now that we go back to that. I think it's really a core point in our future, which way we're going to go. If we don't go back to that heart and integrate that heart with all of that mind, we're going to become really unbalanced. I mean, we already are. We're going to become more unbalanced.
Right. And so far, we've been talking about the intuition on knowing maybe what career path you should be on or what you should be doing in life. Let's bring that into what I said I was going to talk about, which is voiceover, which is a huge decision that a lot of people make for themselves, as is, a lot of creative projects are these days. And a lot of coaches, social media, gurus, that sort of thing, are sort of telling people that voiceover can be very lucrative. You can make a lot of money, that all you have to do is talk for a living. And a lot of people mistakenly jump into it, spend a lot of money on the equipment, and then find out it's not for them. So how I wanted to sort of tie what you do into what my listeners do, which is voiceover. How do you know? And again, it goes to, how do you trust? What steps should you take before you make a major decision about a career path?
Yeah, for sure. I think the first thing I always say to people is, does it make your heart sing? And if it's something that you get excited about when you wake up in the morning and you can't wait to go do it and you want to learn more about and you have a passion for, passion is a sign of a direct relationship with intuition, right? Our passion flows from that intuitive connection of alignment of going out into the world and doing what's right for us and how we can make the most impact. Because if we love it, we're going to do it better, right? That's the real key. If you love something, you're going to put your whole heart into it, right? So the first thing is, if it makes your heart sing. If it's something you're thinking, well, this is just something I can go do to make money, then maybe, sure, maybe it'll work out fine. But if you're in love with it and you're excited by it, that's more of a calling. That's like a talent, right? You know that it's something that's meant for you. Right? And so that's really the first thing I'd say. And then beyond that, I really say, getting in touch with that creative intuition. So that's the third type of intuition when we were talking about the 4 different types of intuition, is creative intuition. And that's that sort of the calling that moves us from within and allows us to find our vocation in life. And most of us, we start our lives out doing jobs, right? We find a job, we do it, but then eventually we grow into our vocation, into the thing that we love, the thing that makes our heart sing and that we can give back to the world. So I would say aligning with that and following the open doors. So when things are right,
Open doors.
the
Okay.
doors start to open. That's
Mm-hmm.
alignment, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you might want to do something and it's not really working out, or the doors aren't opening. Sometimes that's the universe looking out for you, right? It's a
Mm-hmm.
redirect, right? So if
Yeah.
the doors start to open, if someone's like, oh, hey, here's this job you should try out, or here's this person you should talk to who's an expert in the field and can give you great ideas. When
Right.
those things start to happen, those are validations from the universe. So you listen to the calling within, and then you listen to the calling
Mm.
without. And when
Yeah.
you have both of those aligned, I think it's pretty safe to say you're on the right path.
So the opposite of that might be if you are wanting to do something, anything career wise, and you just get doors slammed in your face, you should maybe reconsider. Is that what you're thinking?
Well,
If you push too hard, it's not the right path.
yes and yes. I think first of all, there is a thing called trying too hard, right? And that even comes back to when you're talking about intention and manifestation. It's like that when you're trying to reach that dish on the top shelf and you just barely reach it, but you end up pushing it further away because it's not in your grasp. Like, we
Yes.
want to be careful we're not in that situation where we're trying so hard that we're overreaching and we end up pushing something away. So when we put too much energy into something, sometimes we can actually create this sort of energetic situation that repels it. But at the same time, those closed doors aren't always a bad thing. Like, or not
Mm.
even, they're not even a no always.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes those closed doors are a sign that, it's just maybe not the right time this second. Maybe it's time to be in a holding pattern. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
you just wait. It doesn't mean that it's like, oh, just throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's not for me.
Right.
But those are sort of like yellow lights or green lights from the universe that say, all right, not now. Right.
Yeah.
So you might get those, and it might be not now, but it might be in a year or 6 months or whatever.
And also, how do we get the other things that might come to play, like, oh, fear? I'll never be able to do that. That isn't
Imposter
something that
syndrome.
I can ever do. To think that I could whatever, that's certainly nothing that'll ever happen for me. How do we get rid of that?
One of the things I used to say back when I was working in technology, and I was working with a lot of startups, and I ran a business incubator for several years, and I worked with a lot of emerging technology companies that were in this sort of imposter syndrome phase of like, am I going to be able to do this? Do I really own this? And one of my most favorite things to say was, you do your best when you don't know what you're doing, right? So, and people forget about that, right?
Oh,
So if you know what you're doing, if you know everything 100% what you're doing, well, then you've gotten into that place where you're not growing anymore, right? When you don't know what you're doing, that means you're experimenting, you're taking risks, you're thirsty for knowledge, you're trying new things. These are all the conditions that make it ripe for growth and success, especially if you're starting a new job or starting your own business or trying something new and building something. So not knowing what you're doing is a wonderful thing. And don't let imposter syndrome ever scare you, because I in my own life, I've had the best success when I didn't know what I was doing. I'm doing all this stuff with creative technology and intuition. I'm just trying stuff, throwing it at the wall. And it worked. And it was amazing because I was in that place where I was receptive to my intuition. When you start to get so formulaic and you think that you know everything, well, then we're living back in the world of the mind, and we're living in a place that's not malleable or is not agile. And then we start to die. Like, that's how we start to create this sort of casket of a profession, right? We want to be out there in that field of risk and new energy.
if somebody wants to find a new career path, do you have like a checklist you could suggest to people, or how do they, sit down and really think about it and get a grasp on it? Journaling, writing, or what would you suggest?
Yeah, and we work a lot with situations like that in Intuition Lab. A lot of the students there are people that are want to make a transition in their life, right? You get to a certain point in your life and you realize this is great, but I've outgrown this job, I've outgrown this relationship, I need to go and sort of recreate my life and reinvent myself. And in terms of the career aspect of it, I do a lot of business coaching, and I talk with a lot of folks about transitioning out of that sort of 40-hour work week, 9 to 5 job, and into something that's really more their vocation and heart's work. And it's usually a gradual process, right? It's something that, there's usually a transition time where you do a little stuff on the side, and you do your research at least on the side and get things ready. But in the end, it's something that you really have to just follow the next step that's ahead. And that's the one thing about intuition is, people are a little afraid to follow it because it just sort of shows you the next step, right? Like, oh, maybe this job isn't feeling right anymore. Okay. So it's telling me to take the next step to maybe go update my resume or go look for some more new little jobs, or maybe brainstorm on the internet of different things I might like. But you don't necessarily have the end goal. You don't say, oh, this means I'm going to be a millionaire and working for this company. No, you don't see that far ahead. You just see the next step. So my advice is really just is to follow your intuition and that inner resonance, to take the next step of your calling, and just step by step, trust that life will get you where you need to be.
We always hear about women's intuition. Do you think that because of the difference in brains between men and women, the way we think and look at the world, that women might be more intuitive?
Well, I always say everyone has intuition, but sometimes women are a little better at it. I mean, in my classes are highly skewed on the level of female versus male. And the males that are in the class are definitely very in touch with their feminine side. And I think what it comes back to in the end is not so much whether we're a man or a woman, but whether or not we are embodying masculine or feminine energy, because intuition is a very feminine energy, because it's like the yin, it's receptive. You open up, you receive it, it flows through you. Where regular, ordinary thinking is more yang, like you have to go out there and you have to figure it out, and you go into the world and solve problems, right? So there is definitely that sort of complementary nature of intuition, and I think there's it's not surprising that right now you see intuition coming up as you see women coming up, as you see the feminine coming up. All of it's coming up together right now, and there's a reason for that synchronicity, right? That feminine power is coming up into the world because the masculine power has just gotten out of hand. We got to come back up there and balance everything out.
And they definitely, I'm generalizing, and so are you, and we don't want to do that. But if you look at the world, it doesn't seem like the things that we have put into being have been intuitive. It's been for other reasons, to gain power, to gain money, those sorts of things.
Yes.
Okay, so go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just agreeing 100%.
Yeah. So far we've been talking about intuition as far as career paths, being creative, what steps you can take to enrich your life. What about the intuition of, I'm walking down a street and I think I should go a different way? Is fear maybe kind of an intuition, or touch on that a little bit?
So yes, your intuition can 100% guide you and keep you safe. It is one of your safety tools. Fear can be, fear itself is not an intuition, because intuition it is really the alignment with truth, right? So fear can be a response that triggers intuition, that makes you tune into your intuition. But so there's a great story that actually I wrote about in Radical Intuition about a woman that I met who lived in Washington, D.C. And she had that same situation. She was walking home midnight one night, and she had this thought that, oh, maybe I should go home another way, or she didn't feel good. And she noticed up and ahead, there was a police car up. It was just a bunch of businesses. It was downtown. I guess he was parked up there. And she had this thought, I should just ask him to give me a ride home. But then she said, no, I'd be silly. I'd be crazy. He'd think I was nuts. And plus the universe will protect me. I'm strong. I know kickboxing. So she did all those lines, that self-talk stuff. And sure enough, she got jumped that night, and she got pretty badly hurt. And luckily she was okay. A neighbor heard her and came out. But the lesson was that, even with all the fear and all the stuff that was going through her head, when she said, well, the universe will protect me, and this is the story that she tells. This isn't even me. She told the story to me. Is what I didn't realize is that the universe was already protecting me by giving me the idea to go to the police car.
Okay.
That was that intuition. That was the
Yep.
intuition. Go to the
Yep.
police car. But then she
Yep.
talked herself out, and she, even though she was in the state of fear, and her mind and all
Right.
this stuff got in the way.
And that could be anything like, gee, maybe I shouldn't get on this flight, or I should change
Right.
my trip, or I should go at another time, or
Right.
maybe I shouldn't marry this person.
Exactly.
My intuition is just saying, no, 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 don't do it. And so many times we do things that we know maybe we shouldn't do, and we do them anyway. And I guess that's part of life, and not trusting in our intuition.
Exactly. And hindsight's always 2020, right? You look back and like, oh, famous last words. I should have trusted my intuition.
Isn't it? We talk about it all the time. Gee, I shouldn't have taken that car on that big trip. I was worried about it, but I did it anyway,
Yep.
and the car broke down.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think that I'm a true believer in intuition, and I don't use mine often enough, and I've gotten a lot out of what you've said we should do. Um, Tell us a little bit before I let you go about intellect versus intuition. You have some of that on your website too.
Yeah. So even like circling back to our conversation about balancing out the polarities, intellect and intuition, I never want people to think that I'm saying intuition is more important than intellect. What I'm saying is that it's time for intuition to be an equal with intellect, because we've been so intellectually heavy, mind heavy, at least for the last 100 years in our Western society, that we've let part of our power go. Like that's we're not going to live in our full power as human beings until we live up to our potential with both sides of our brain. We have two hemispheres. We have two ways of thinking and learning in the world, and we're mostly just using half of them all the time. But the other half is there, and there's no reason why we can't use it and allow it to inform our lives every day. So the more of us that start to get in touch with that intuitive side, it's only going to support our rational thinking minds ultimately, and it will lead us to higher places of wisdom and genius and truth and all of those things that we really want in the world.
So, is there anything we didn't touch on in our little chat today that you wanted to mention before I let you go?
No, I just would like to remind everybody that it's okay to make mistakes when you're working with intuition. Like sometimes you think you're following your intuition and something goes wrong. Just remember this: your intuition is never wrong. It's impossible for your intuition to be wrong, because the definition of intuition is the connection to truth, right? So what happens is we can mistake our own sort of wants, fears, hopes with intuition. And sometimes that way it doesn't turn out the way we think, but that's okay, because sometimes we just don't see the whole picture, right? Sometimes we think we failed, but we didn't, because there's more coming. So trust your intuition. Even if it doesn't take you exactly where you think you should be, your intuition will take you where you need to be.
Okay, great. Well, as a final note, tell us again, how do people get in touch with you, and what do you offer?
Yeah, they can check out my classes, and we have all kind of quarterly classes and free classes at intuition-lab.com. And you can learn more about me at my website, kimchestney.com. And Radical Intuition is available at bookstores everywhere. So you can get it Amazon, online, wherever you like to buy books.
Okay, so you're on the East Coast. So are your classes, some of them in person and some of them online, or how do you do that?
Primarily, I have an international global community online that we have students from all around the world. I do in-person retreats and workshops, although since the pandemic, we're still ramping back up, but
Right.
I did them a lot more before then. But right now, the best way to get in touch with me is through the online work, because it's so nice to be able to reach people all around the world.
Okay, great. Well, Kim Chestney, CHESTNEY.com is your website. Thank you so much for spending time with me today, and very best to you.
Well, thanks for having me. Be well.